by, unfortunately, some people in our government. So that's what we're talking about, Don.
I want to come back to what call of action or call to action exists. In other words, how can people, beyond getting more informed and listening to a program like this, what can they do, especially right now, to be of assistance? We'll be back in a moment. Jim Jatras is with me. He is the authorized representative for Kosovo's Orthodox Christian Serbian community. And Jim, I want to read something that I picked up online. It's from Independent Online News Service. And it reads thus: Kosovo said on Monday it would demand independence from Serbia when the two sides meet this month for the highest level talks between the two sides since NATO's 1990 war drove out Serb forces. UN mediators hope to bring together the presidents and prime ministers of Serbia and its United Nations-run majority Albanian province in Vienna on July the 24th. And for the first time, Kosovo's international status, independence, or autonomy will top the agenda. After 6 months of lower-level talks on the rights and security of minority Serbs, and there again's that play with words, minority Serbs.
Exactly.
I mean, that's like, I'm sorry, but the analogy fits for me at least. That's like calling residents of Southern California who are Native Americans, who are,
English-speaking people.
Because they are going to be outnumbered by people coming in from the South, from Mexico.
Right.
Somehow they're the minority when they're part of the 50 states.
It's a sleight of hand, and that's where, again, you look at the language here. They demand, like Hamas demands things of Israel. And they mentioned by the prime ministers, as if Mr. Koštunica, a scholar and a good Christian gentleman, who, as I said about the Federalist Papers, the so-called prime minister on the Albanian side is a man named Agim Čeku, who's an indicted war criminal in Serbia for the command responsibility over 600 deaths during the terrorist war against Serbia. This man, just a couple of weeks ago, came to Washington, met with Secretary Rice, and went to the White House, and was received as an honored guest when the man should be in the dock as a criminal defendant. So that just shows you how skewed a lot of this presentation is here.
Now, it says 90% of Kosovo's 2 million people are ethnic Albanians. Could it not just as well read Albanian Muslims?
Right.
Impatient for independence, Serbia has offered wide autonomy for land seen as the sacred cradle of the nation.
That's right.
What you've said is already the case, that it's not a matter of their rights being abridged or their ability to function being abridged by the Serbians if they were to regain proper control, as would make sense. But then it goes on at the bottom and says, the West is pushing for a deal by the end of 2006, concerned that a delay could spark fresh violence against the UN mission and Kosovo's 100,000 remaining Serbs, a ghettoized minority.
Exactly. The fact of the matter is the remaining Christian Serbs live in little enclaves under the tenuous protection of the NATO forces. If they go outside of those enclaves, somebody's going to kill them. And then they expect that in a negotiation they will believe assurances for their security after Kosovo becomes an independent state, security that has been unable to be provided during direct international control of Kosovo. Nobody believes this.
And this the result of U.S.-led NATO intervention in the 90s that was ostensibly to punish a bad man, Milosevic, but in fact, although he deserved what he got, that's not the point. It really handed, effectively, de facto, it handed control of Kosovo to the Albanians. Am I right?
That's right. And here we are, 7 years later, with a democratic government in Serbia essentially then being dictated to about turning the territory over once and for all to this violent terroristic movement. It's just simply absurd.
And I want to go back for a moment to have you reiterate how this will reinforce the hand of jihad all over the world if this occurs.
Yes, as I said, I mentioned about the explosives for Madrid and London coming through Kosovo. Again, the criminal rackets, which everywhere you go, the drug trafficking. Remember, you hear about all the opium produced in Afghanistan that we haven't been able to stamp out. Where does that opium go? How does it get to Europe? It goes through the Balkans and particularly through Kosovo. You hear about trafficking in sex slaves. These girls from Moldova, Ukraine, places like that. They're taken by criminal gangs to Kosovo, and then they're shipped out across the Adriatic via either Albania or Montenegro, put on boats to Italy, and then taken up to the rest of the continent. Those things are closely tied to the terrorist networks throughout the continent. Those things will only get worse if you take the terrorists and criminals and say, you are now the sovereign government of this territory. And that's what they're talking about here.
The EU apparently wants to be involved in the outcome of this as well, as I understand from this article. In a report to EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels, EU Enlargement Commissioner Olli Rehn said the bloc intended to be the driving force of the international presence, with the head of that mission also serving as EU special representative. So it's really a closing of ranks against Serbia on this all the way around.
That's right, and it's one of these things where bureaucrats can always find a common language, despite which bureaucracy they belong to, whether it's the EU or NATO or the UN or whatever it might be. And that's why, and we're going to get it to what we're trying to do here this week, if you can shine a spotlight on this policy, it cannot stand the light of day. If you leave it in the dark for bureaucrats to just sort of, move ahead, business as usual, let's not talk about what's really going on here, they think they can move it forward.
Let's come back to that, because I want to use the last 3 or 4 minutes to do just that, focus in on what this week's all about, pardon me, and a call to action where listeners can get directly involved. Back in a moment with Jim Jatras. Again, the website, www.savekosovo, all one word, savekosovo, Kosovo.org. Back in a moment.
105.1 FM, WAVA.
A message from Venable LLP and Global Strategic Communications Group, registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act on behalf of the Serbian National Council of Kosovo and Metohija.
It's getting worse. Believe it or not, there are some in Washington and among our European allies who actually want to make Kosovo an independent country. This would create yet another rogue state and empower a government already racked by corruption and rampant criminality, all led by an indicted war criminal. If this happens, the remaining Christian Serbs will be eradicated. In the middle of a global war on Jihad terror, America should not help create a European haven for crime and terrorism. Please call the U.S. Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 and tell your senator and representative to just say no to Kosovo independence. Then call the White House at 202-456-1111 and tell President Bush just say no to Kosovo independence. For more information, visit the American Council for Kosovo's website at www.savekosovo.org. That's www.savekosovo.org.
Let me just read 1 or 2 more sentences from the Prime Minister's remarks in the Washington Post op-ed piece. I think that was July the 12th. He says, let us recall that Serbia liberated itself from a communist regime on its own by investing enormous effort and taking huge risks. Can such a country, by any measure a democratic one, survive the forcible taking of 15% of its territory? What democratically elected government could explain to its voters after such an act that they should continue to believe in its principles of tolerance, liberalism, and the sacrosanct will of the people, the values of enlightened Western civilization, in the name of which they toppled an evil authoritarian regime? So really, there's so much at stake here that's a profound implication, not just for Serbians, and not just even for the Balkans, but for the world at large.
Absolutely. Every principle that I think your listeners would hold dear, whether we're talking about legality, constitutionalism, resisting terroristic violence, organized crime, all of it, it's all wrapped up together in this one little episode. And I think, as I said earlier, if we can shine a light on this, this is one that can be turned around. And because it's interesting, Don, just in the short time we've been working on this, there's been near panic on behalf of the pro-Muslim Albanian lobby that sees years of hard work to achieve this goal being threatened right now at the tail end when they think they're on the edge of success. So if your listeners could call, as the ad said during the break, 456-1111 at the White House, area code 202, and ask President Bush, just say no to Kosovo independence. Do not create a rogue state in Europe. Same thing with the Capitol Switchboard, 202-224-3121, your senator and representative. Give them the same message. If there are any media out there, we're having a press conference at the National Press Club with Bishop Artemia, also with William Murray of the Religious Freedom Coalition, who's been to Kosovo, Father Keith Roderick of Christian Solidarity International, who's been to Kosovo. They know what the score is here. Listen to what they had to say. Let's get the word out, get a light shined on this. The other thing is, many of the people, and especially the ministers, who are coming to town this week because of what's going on in Israel with Israel and the jihad terror there. This is all a global fight against jihad terror. If you're part of that group, we need to hear from you as well. And because I don't think we can appease terror anywhere without it leading to a weakening of the forces of freedom and also, frankly, Christianity throughout the world.
How can folks best reach you? Through the website?
Through the website. There's contact information there on the website, both by email and by phone number. So I think that's probably the best way.
And folks, if you're in your car or at a point where you haven't been able to write down the White House phone numbers and so forth and this other information, please feel free to give me an email at dks@wava.com, and I'll send out the information we've been talking about, including the website freekosovo.org, and also the White House switchboard is 202-456-1111.
That's correct. And if you go to the website savekosovo.org, there is a link right there that takes you to firstgov.gov that will link you for emails to the White House and to your congressman and senator.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Good to see you and talk
Thank you,
with
Don. It's been a privilege to be here.
And please give your parents my warmest regards,
certainly
George
will.
and Stella. I miss them in this area. I'm delighted to know that they're doing well, and they've been wonderful friends through the years.
Well, you know, they're